call this meeting of the Carson City Historic Resources Commission for Thursday, November 9th, 2017, at the Community Center Sierra Room to order. Tamara, can you please call the roll?
Chairperson Drews.
Here.
Vice Chair Darney.
Here.
Commissioner Block.
Here.
Commissioner Hayes.
Here.
Commissioner Schmitter.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Spilda.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you, Tamara. Item B, public comments. Members of the public who wish to address the commission may approach the podium at this time to speak on matters relevant to or within the authority of the Historic Resources Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken on the matter raised under this public comment portion of the agenda. Is there any public comment? C, for possible action, approval of the minutes from September 25th, 2017.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That was quick. You have to wait till I finish speaking, Greg. Item D, modification of the agenda. Agenda management notice. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. The public body may combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and the public body may remove an item from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. Susan, the first item I understand is been removed.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. Susan Pansky for the record. Item E1 has been withdrawn, and also item E3 has been pulled from this agenda, but you will probably see it on a future agenda. So we're looking at E2 and E4 today.
Okay, thank you. Any other items? Public hearing matters. Item E2 for possible action, HRC-17-163, to consider a request from Jennifer Yen to install roof-mounted solar panels on property's own residential office, RO, located at 314 West 5th Street, APN 003-129-04. Susan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you stated, this is a request for solar panels at 314 West 5th Street. This property is located on the southwest corner of 5th Street and South Division, as shown on the aerial on your screen. These are two photos of the property taken in the last couple days. This is the front elevation looking to the north, and then the side elevation looking to the west. So this is the east side of the building. The applicant is proposing solar panels in two locations. One is on the front elevation, which is on the lower left side circle, and then the other one is on the upper right on the east side elevation. Staff has reviewed this application and has determined that we feel that the solar panels being proposed on the east side elevation, which is the one that's circled here, are appropriate given their location not on the main elevation of the house, the primary frontage. However, we don't support the placement of the solar panels on the roof that is on the south elevation. In addition, there's a condition of approval in this recommendation about the roof-mounted equipment that's on the building, and I'm going to actually go back to that photo. So this is roof-mounted equipment that staff couldn't find an approval for in any HRC or HARC minutes or approvals since it was established in 1982. In the late material that has been submitted, the applicant has provided some additional information. She was able to talk to Dr. Graber, who owned this building previously. He stated that this remodel was done in 1977, and that's when the roof-mounted unit was placed. If that's the case, and we haven't been able to find anything to back that up, but if it's the case, then that was placed before the HARC, Historic Architectural Review Committee was in place. So the commission can review that and take it into consideration. But we are recommending approval again of the solar panels on the east side elevation facing the parking lot, because that is not the primary elevation that's facing the right-of-way. And I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
Can you clarify the ones that are the problem ones? Aren't they facing west? I mean, isn't the front of the building?
They're facing east.
They're facing east.
No, I mean the ones that are circled here are facing east. The others, the problem the problem ones?
The front ones are
On Fifth.
facing east.
So actually, the front ones,
That drawing is facing east?
so
Okay.
the front,
Okay.
sorry, I'm a little rusty.
The-
The front
Okay, I
here,
get confused.
those
Okay, so
actually face
Center line is
The
to
next
gable.
piece to the left
Right.
of that is the.
But then
Yeah,
these
it's the
panels
west.
here, the roof actually slopes to the south, so they actually face south, these. Yeah. And I had a question when I was reviewing this with Hope. I had concerns that the solar panels themselves were actually, and I didn't put it in the presentation, but it is in your packet, the specifications for these solar panels. I had a concern that they were elevated off of the roof at an angle, but upon further review, they're just sitting up a little bit. They are a little bit, but they are basically, the same. They're flush with the roof, essentially.
Thanks, Susan. I might add too that the circled panel is on what appears to be an addition. I think the old house footprint probably extends back from that front part. Driving by, it looked like both the addition to the old part,
And I'm actually
yeah,
going to
to
go back to
that-
that.
yeah, the shed addition coming off that single-story addition looks like that's an addition, a new addition, as well as the lower pitch.
I agree, and we talked about that, Hope and I talked about that as well. We couldn't find anything to determine whether it actually was, but just based on how it looks compared to the rest of the house, it seems like it was an addition, and probably around that 1977 timeframe when Dr. Graber did the addition. So Dr. Yen is here. She's the applicant. She's happy to answer any questions that we have as well.
I have one more technical one. I don't know who can answer it, but in the drawing, there are like 6 panels, I believe, on that back, on the east. Yeah, or 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I know Tesla Solar City is pitching this whole idea of more wattage per panel, fewer panels type of thing. But is there, and the way it's drawn, I'm thinking, since we're having trouble with the other one more towards Fifth Street here, is there room for more on that south-facing slope of that newer addition? Could that somehow accommodate what we'd have more trouble with towards Fifth Street?
And I'm actually going to refer that question to the applicant, and she also has a rep, I think, from Solar City as well to answer questions. So I'll let him do the technical stuff.
Thank you. Dr. Yan, would you like to come up, and you need to introduce yourself for the record?
How are you? I'm Jennifer Yant. Solar panel refer to me that their panel is designed to receive the maximum sound source. So they design more toward to the parking lot that can eliminate the look, So one side, the circle being approved, that is on the single unit. The other one they design is on top of the roof, which is the panel is facing to my parking lot. So I don't know why there's an issue for facing to the parking lot. Of course, on the Fifth Street, I'm on the corner lot of the house. It's very hard, it's to eliminate the panel. So, and then solar panel cities, they say they need a minimum at least 8 panel in order to generate the electricity. So right now we have 4 on this side and 5 on that side, so they just hit to the minimum 9 panel. And then I still have to tuck in 3 panel. If they take out 1 panel, I still have to tuck in 3 more panel on different locations. So it's all calculated by the engineer group. And then the Solar City is right here to answer all the questions. So
The issue we have
Yeah.
is that Fifth Street elevation, that south elevation of your house, is the signature elevation of that building.
Oh, okay.
Those panels, we have a really good example of solar panels in the historic district that are put on an addition to an old house on Musser and Minnesota. We have a terrible one down the street from that we thought would be hidden from view, but it comes up above the gables when you drive by, the solar panel jumps out at you. And just, the only way you could eliminate that is if you use the new Tesla shingles, so it was flush with the roof, and you wouldn't see it, you could probably get away with putting it on a historic structure. Since these are going to be raised a little bit, it will be visible. Do you own the garage behind this?
Yes, I still own the garage part.
Have you considered putting a panel on that south?
Because I have a tree blocking on the thing.
Yeah, well, there's a tree that's,
I was thinking about on the
Yeah.
garage, complete, like nobody see it too, I discussed with them, but they say they have an engineer calculate everything, so that's the best.
yeah, so these are
places.
the two best locations?
Two places best. And
Could-
then,
Could you put more panels in that circled area, in that
not
addition?
another space, not another space, yes.
Susan, can you show that east elevation?
Is the air conditioning unit, is that still functional, or are you going to?
Yes, the air conditioner unit, according to the previous owner, Dr. Raymond Graber, he said the unit, this is a AC and heater unit. It's huge unit. When he remodeled the whole building in June of 1977, and the electrical and plumbing does have to be inspected by the city. So at that time, there's no way that he can manpower to put on that AC unit. I had to use a large crane to put on the roof. So everything is got permit to the standard. And then after he placed in that one, also fire department come and check too. Also.
Well, actually, though, a comment, I mean, that's amazingly ancient unit as
Yes.
heating and AC goes. I
I
from my
never
own
see that
experience,
one.
only a block away. But, so, I mean, and certainly they're way more efficient now,
Of
and
course.
all kinds of ways you can save money and blah, blah, blah. So maybe part of the solution, if that were out of the way, is there more room to put a few more? If that were somehow down on the ground, like all my stuff is either under the house or in the basement or on the outside on the ground, in my AC and heating scenario. So if that were not there, is there more room? Could an engineer from Tesla Solar City go over there and say, okay, we could get a few more panels in here if that big beast weren't sitting there?
I think the width and the dimension is not enough. We concerned about, okay, how about this AC unit down? But for some reason, that roof area is not enough for the dimension, for the 4 panel to put it on. I really don't know. This one had to.
Yeah, it looks like that unit's
Yeah.
sitting right on the valley of the junction between the two roofs.
Yes,
So
it's on the,
not a prime spot for a panel.
yes.
Okay, well, just while we're brainstorming, can we imagine what that roof that we're okay with that further back, that's sloping to the south, if that were all
Okay, then,
solar, not solar panels, but the Tesla Solar City solar shingles, maybe the textured version being the closest to the asphalt shingle, I guess, having looked at some of these pictures of what's available, the types that are available. I mean, could you, Solar City person, answer that question? What kind of energy if you covered that whole roof with, say, the textured version solar shingle? What kind of wattage could you get out of that versus these panels? I mean, it's nice to know in general because I know it's a more expensive scenario, but if you just did that piece, I'm just thinking, brainstorming.
Yeah, my name is Jeb Bateman, for the record. I'm a energy consultant, or now energy advisor with Tesla Energy and Solar City. These are interesting questions as far as the amount of productivity of a solar shingle. Really not available. I'm planning to get those on my house when I replace an old wood shake roof from the 1950s when they're available, but as far as the immediate availability, we don't have a lot of those. We're just doing a few projects while we build a factory similar to the factory here in New York to produce a lot of those. And that hasn't been engineered. So this is This is a project that requires careful measurements. We've engineered this one for solar panels and actually tried several times to get more productivity because we're doing, a portion of the power here, not all, for Dr. Yin. So we've eliminated all the other areas of the roof. Even looked at the north slope behind there. The structure wasn't compatible in that area. Couldn't be upgraded. We're doing upgrades to the rafters in certain areas to make it work. The lower elevation facing east was also checked, eliminated. So this is really the most productive technology. The cells that we're using in these panels, the 325s, are the same exact cells that are being used in the solar roof tiles that you're talking about. And I would say down the road, you're going to see a lot, probably, assuming that product it goes into full production and more houses, including mine, get retrofitted when they redo the roof. This is a brand new roof, so it doesn't make sense to tear off a good roof and put another roof on there. The market plan for the solar roof is really when it's time to do the roof, then you could look at that option for the entire building, and that's like a 20-year proposition in this case. Once that roof is done in 20 years, the agreement on these panels would be done as well, and it would be appropriate to look at that option down the road.
So,
How about ground-mounted options? Are they any in the back of the parking lot, whatever?
Certainly, as you drive around Carson City, you see a lot of parking structures, say on schools, and those are possibilities. They're completely different types of projects, completely different types of financing. They're not something that Solar City and Tesla markets currently, at least not through my department. We do large utility scale and commercial projects in other areas, but I'm not in that department and certainly wouldn't be appropriate for this scale system.
I noticed that they're 3 feet away from the edge of the roof. Is it possible to push them back a little bit further from the edge of the roof, the front gable?
That's a great question. This is more recent. A lot of the older systems you'll see, including in the historic district, some of the things you've mentioned. I'm not familiar with all of them. I've done projects as close as Long Street personally with Solar City and have been in the downtown area quite a bit. We didn't used to have setback requirements. That's a newer fire code that you have to be 3 feet from the edge, 3 feet from the ridge. That does take quite a bit of square footage in a situation like this where the roof space is fairly tight. I'm not aware of any ways around that. Once the fire codes are set, that's inspected. Everything has to be done according to the current codes to get approval and inspections passed so we can get permission to operate.
So it has to be at least 3 feet from the edge, but could it be more than 3 feet?
It could be more than 3 feet. Is the question to...
Because if we could make it so that you couldn't, so our heartburn from the Historic Review Commission is that if you can see the solar panel on the roof line when you're looking at the gable, when you're standing looking at the house, if there's that little bump up that shows the solar panel, then that's going to sort of throw off the architectural value of the older building. And so if we could push it back a little bit so that you couldn't see it from like across the street. That, and maybe 4 feet away from the edge of the roof would give you that
that kind of depth.
kind of depth.
I can kind of see what you're saying there.
So would the panels still fit in that zone?
Well, they fit within a range. It's not exactly 3 feet. It's certainly something that we could request to move them as far from the gable end as possible so that they still fit there. There's nothing wrong with that. I just installed a system in Reno yesterday. Also very careful with aesthetics on that system. It's one of our primary concerns. And we did a portion of the system on the front of the house, but very clean, and then a portion kind of invisible on the other side of the house, even though it's less efficient. We're also using the ZEP mounting system here, which is the lowest profile possible, including a front skirt, so that you can't really see under the panels. There's a trim plate along there. That's going to be we consider that better aesthetics than anything else you've seen previously in this area.
Yeah, that's good.
I just want to point out, I'm glad you're here and talking with us. We've only done 2 solar projects in the district. The first one worked out well because it was on a new structure, so it wasn't on the historic structure. And we didn't even notice that it went a little bit above the apex of the roof because no one could get around behind it and sort of look at it. The second one was a bit of a boo-boo because it definitely is above the apex of the roof. And you, looking at it from the north side, from Robson Street, you go, how'd we do that? So it just depends on location. This is a very visible location at the very south end of the historic district. And you're just struggling with trying to do what's right for the district and still accommodate modern new things. And, solar's a good thing, but we're just struggling,
Yeah, I read through the recommendations from staff as well, and it appeared that it's very much open to interpretation. For example, it mentions eliminating or attempting to find out of anything out of that's invisible. Obviously, the backside of the structure. We did that. It recommends placing solar flush to the roof, which we're doing, instead of tilting them up. That's one of the things that a lot of people have been concerned about, is seeing solar panels tilted up. That's a historic method that's used for efficiency. Now that's not so much of a concern because we have more efficient panels. Economics, we only do flush mounting at the Tesla and Solar City because we don't want to have any issues with aesthetics. So it should be as good as possible.
Okay, go ahead. Just out of curiosity, what's the rate of return on investment with this? How long will it take to pay thousands of dollars off in saving on electricity? And say for this particular thing with all 9 solar panels that are proposed?
So the economics of this solar lease are kind of, I don't know that should be discussed so much in this format. I'd be glad to discuss economics of any individual.
That's
Yeah.
fine, I understand, because my brother got a quote on a 2,000 square foot house and it was about 80 grand, but and I understand why you don't want to discuss it here, and you're correct.
Well, there's, in general, there's different ways to do solar. I do projects everywhere from a zero investment lease. We're making the investment in this case, and customers buying the electricity over a period of time, to $80,000 project down in Minden that I just looked at and worked on yesterday. So there's really very wide ranges. In my case of my own house, I did a leased project for a house that I first purchased by the university. Paid nothing for that. Have a long-term agreement with a fixed price for electricity at competitive rates, and then I ended up selling that house this year and buying another house that needs a roof. So I plan to do that. In the case of a solar roof, that might be what you're talking about. That a solar roof could be easily $50,000 plus for those shingles and tiles when they're available.
So,
Yeah,
Jeff,
we should take note that Solar City does some creative things in terms of how you get a solar in your house. You don't have to necessarily spend big bucks. You have a lease, you have a contract.
I understand
It's
these things, but
Gentlemen, it really
We're right
isn't.
there,
It
real
really
quick.
is not
we need
within
to
our
get
purview
focused
to
back
talk,
onto
to talk about.
what we're talking about, the front view of the house from Fifth Street, correct?
Jeff, is it possible where the HVAC unit is to split those 4 panels on that roof
Up and behind.
up perpendicular to the roof line on the left side, maybe do an L shape? I mean, it seems like that roof is it's part of the old structure, but it's hidden from the street, it's hidden from view. I don't know that we necessarily need 4 panels in the array like we have in front there. If we could get 4 panels squeezed into that, we may have a solution. And I would think structurally, by splitting those panels into 2 by 2 and then an L-shaped 2, we might be able to get it.
Yeah, it seems to me that the sun hitting that panel on the back side, as long as you're back far enough from where the house steps up on the left there. But if you're up and behind that unit, from looking at your roof plan here, it looks like there might be enough room for the whole array to be there instead of where we have it. Susan, can you kind of point to that area there? It's to the behind and right behind there, and then
Talking about,
over
like,
above it, behind it also.
Behind the HVAC unit on the east-facing slope.
Correct.
That one we are facing the Division Street, so is that will be a problem? No, this is on the east side. Also on.
Right there where she's pointing, and behind it probably also. The roof plan shows it better on your drawing, that looks to me like more area there than there is on you see that area to the left of the blue, right there.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. What you can't see on that two-dimensional drawing is the, all the shade in that area. So it's shaded by the main building, which is higher, and also by the HVAC unit. So productivity there would be very minimal. And we're already right at the edge of.
It just seems to me that if you put them 3 feet down from the ridge, along the length of that ridge, that as long as you stayed away from where the house pops up to the bottom, there's nothing blocking the sun from any of it. They'd be above the HVAC system, or at least parallel with it.
Yeah, I agree that looks, from this view, productive. I can double check or triple check. In this case, it's already been doubled and triple checked. I'll check again and see if it's possible. I believe if that was a productive space, we would have already used it because, as I said, I've attempted to increase this production. There's a very small system. It's only doing a portion. If I was able to put panels on any other portion of this roof, they would already be in this drawing. and that has to do with structural considerations as well as productivity. Like, for example, the north slope would be useful if the structure was able to support panels there as well.
Now, I've also had experience on these in other locations, and I do have to say in your favor that the panels with that low profile they look more like skylights from your first observation as you go by. Unless they're in a big array, then they look like an array. But in this kind of scale, those will appear to be more like a skylight than a solar panel.
Susan, could you go back to the front view of the house? Right there.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd ever see.
So, well, when you're looking on the right side of that, you see the main structure and then the addition that had all the windows that was lower on that. Is that really shaded? Because in the drawing, it doesn't,
Yeah.
I don't see a dimension here of how it looks pretty big here.
Once you get past noon, you're going to get all blocked.
That'll all be shadowed? Because I can see the main original structure, not any of the additions are in the back. And it does look like that tree is deciduous on the right, but after about noon, you're right, the southern exposure kind of goes away.
Yeah, I know. I think because of that low profile, those things I don't think they stick up any more than 5 or 6 inches. And they're at least 3 feet, maybe 4 to 5, depending on their scale. But I'm not seeing that I'm going to have a problem with that.
Can you go back to the parking lot view, Susan?
Could I see that picture of the apron?
The skirt.
So, Jeff, I guess I'm having, where we have the panels on the lower addition is structurally sound, but the north slope of that roof is constructed different or something, or I don't understand why we can put it on the south.
It was a surprise to me as well. I attempted to use that area. We were able to add some what's called sistering, so additional structural members to the south section. We were not able to do so in the north section, and I did attempt to do that.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Chair. being that these are put on to the old structure, they still can be removed without harming the contributing element of the building, can it? And then, so what you're saying too, Jeff, is that the ones at the existing old structure, the higher side, they'll be 3 feet back from the fascia of the front of the house by code.
Yeah, that's by code, and it wouldn't bother me at all to ask the installers to move them as far back as possible without running into the setback required by the dormer.
Are there more questions, comments? Passing things around?
So the skirt only goes on the bottom and not the side.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a little bit of views, such as on the Tesla website, of side skirts as well. I don't see those in any installs currently. Theoretically, side skirting may be something you guys could attempt to ask for, and I would do my best to get that approved, if that would help.
I also like the fact that the color of the shingles couldn't be better for a solar panel. They just don't have the contrast that you see like in some of these photographs where it's on a tan background.
Susan, could we go back to the front gable? It seems like it wouldn't show if it's back like 4 feet. Because 3 feet, it probably wouldn't show.
That's kind of when I look at it.
And that's the only elevation that's going to be, I mean, the parking lot elevation.
What about the south side of the street? People are going to be on that sidewalk as well.
If you're back further, well, you can only go back as far as the
Sidewalk.
dental
Aren't they
across the street.
Aren't they on the sidewalk?
You're on the sidewalk right there. Looks like
That's
that.
the north side of Fifth Street. What about the south side of Fifth Street when you're across 2.5 lanes?
That's what it looks like they're on. See, the picture goes all the way to the bottom here. They're standing on the opposite sidewalk, it looks like.
Well, the visibility will come if you're a little bit further east on
Yeah,
Fifth and looking back
like when you're
towards
driving.
it, then it'll suddenly come into view, but,
In context with the elevation of the south facade, though.
Aren't we more?
As soon as you go further right in this photograph, that tree on the right's blocking the whole facade. Of course, that only is relevant until someone cuts the tree down.
Looks like a healthy tree.
But how do we look at stuff that can be removed that doesn't adversely affect the original structure? Because I'm guessing you're going to do mounts on that roof that are going to be waterproof before the solar panels go up, then you put the solar panels on, but the solar panels at some point in time are going to need to be replaced, or someone's going to want to remove them, and the roof underneath there's still going to be waterproof. So are we?
Roofing need to be replaced. Right?
Or the roofing may be replaced, but it's not altering the original structure, is it?
As long as it doesn't modify the character-defining features, which is the front facade in this case. So
It's about the
It's
impact
removable.
of its
Yeah, but it-
presence, I guess.
it still needs to not be obtrusive.
do we know what the setback from the dormer is and how much more we can push it
Same thing,
North.
3 feet.
from the Fifth Street end?
It's all
of the-
3 feet.
And so how much, I don't know the.
Typically,
what are
it's
the measurements?
18 inches from a valley, so, yeah.
Probably could scoot it back a couple more feet. I assume the roof plan we're looking at is pretty much to scale as far as everything relative to each other?
And you're looking on what? Page 3?
Page 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's 3, and then it looks boxed in from the dormer.
That's pretty much where it is, yeah.
Yeah. it's already close.
Very close. I don't know how we're talking on here.
Yeah, we couldn't do anything there.
Cannot do nothing.
We tried.
But right here, you can put a 6 panel on and then leave 2 panel.
I'm kind of thinking out loud here. What if, for that front array, you went with 3 panels, 2 the way they're oriented right now, turn the other one, and then add another panel to the back array within that? It looks like we could fit one
At the north end.
one more. Can you go to the, do we have page 3 in the plans there? Actually, that'll work. Yeah, if we look at the one in the center, if we were to take one of the panels off the front and at the very north panel, add one, and then keep our back 2 on the front one, turn one perpendicular to get more space between the eave and the panels. Would that work?
I have another drawing here with kind of rafter layouts and dimensions, if that might help to kind of see this in better perspective. Again, if there was space to put more, I would have already done that. And the mounting system, the ZET mounting system that has this nice aesthetic, does require at least 2. You can't just do like 1 panel alone. They're attached to each other as well as the mounts. It's like 1 unit up there. In my opinion, and I've done quite a number of systems, that square layout there that's of a concern will be the best aesthetic possible. Like some people have mentioned, that looks like a skylight at first glance, and it's a square. If you start changing make it 3, it's not going to look nearly as aesthetic.
I guess the issue is it's the best possible, but we've got an historic structure that doesn't have them now. And
We have staff that's recommended not doing the
yeah,
ones on the south.
and
the
I
south.
think staff's recommendations are right on point when you look at the Secretary standards. It doesn't quite work there. And I'm not sure
Can we have them look at the
how to make it work.
more closely? It seems like there's gobs of room up there behind that AC unit.
I think the issue there is also structural, similar to the north slope.
My concern is the 4 panels on the historic structure where you can see it from the front of the house, the wave of the future, if you will, and lease agreements and no cost to the homeowner and stuff to put them in, if that's going to set a precedence for people saying, well, it affected the front view of the house here, what about my house and this house? Because, with solar credits, it's getting harder for individuals to be able to afford it, but they're not the individual owners aren't having to afford it. So if we allow those there, does it open the door for other people to perhaps put solar panels that are visible from the front of the house, from the sidewalk view right in front of the house? That's my concern.
Yeah, well, the saving grace someday will be like those shingles and so on, that are obviously a way more expensive idea and not right here in our lap yet. But I mean, something along those lines is going to help historic districts in lots of places somehow fit in modern technology, and it still looks historic and without too many modern doodads hanging on it, including the HVAC thing, which would not fly. It just happened, it went in a long time ago. And it would look prettier on the ground somewhere, no doubt, but it's there. So, over time, that's going to be the solution, but here, we're struggling with it right now.
Can you try to do you understand what we're saying? And can you try again? Because we'd like to say yes, but This is,
Those four can tuck in somewhere with the engineer.
I mean, even with the apron as a condition.
Yeah, I don't think any of
on
us
the
have a problem with
side.
the 5, it's the 4 in the front.
Right.
I think we will probably need a Tesla engineer to recalculate how we tuck in the other four to the other roof. If they can, then we will probably present to you one more time.
And maybe you need to reinforce the roof or whatever the heck, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera, but.
I would love to, give some assurances that we could do some other layout. It's just,
If you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
what are we talking about weight-wise for a single panel with the bracket
Would be a
and
double
mounting?
panel.
I mean, is there an average?
the average for an installed system is about 2.5 pounds per square foot. And that was the average I used to use when I did the panels up on rails, like when you used to see them higher off the roof. You would do a rail system. So that included the rails. This is a direct mount. The panels have a channel in them that hooks to the mounts, and they're all hooked together. Yeah, I have to admit, it's the first time I've been in front of a historic district. So excuse my inexperience here. Most of the questions I get are in regard to like homeowners associations and whether an HOA will approve solar. And my common reference is just to the solar access law in Nevada that gives homeowners the rights to use their sunshine. And then the new law in Nevada that gives homeowners the rights to self-generate again. So I don't know how that applies to the historic district situation, to be honest. You do.
When that legislation was passed, we had the same question. It's like, okay, so who has the authority here? And I don't think it's been tested, so it's a good question, and it'll get answered at some point, I'm sure. But our success is a great success. Our failure with solar in the district was partly because of naivete. It was us, it looked like a good solution. We weren't really specific in our approval to make sure it was as good as it can be. I mean, I think with the new designs, we're getting closer. And, I mean, Dr. Yen, if you could go back and see if we have more options on that, around that HVAC unit, that'd be great, because I think that's probably the best solution we could come up with, and still keep the integrity of the front part of that building and meet our standards. I mean, I'd love to see it in there, and I'd love to see another win in the district. And if we could do that, I think it works pretty well.
I have to see how the AC duct connect to the whole building inside too, so it's not that you move the AC down is to solve the problem. So it's how the structure inside to connect to that AC that is more complicated to move the AC down,
Even where, going back to that part where the AC unit, would you be opposed to having them on the west side of the roof as well, being that you'll never see those from the street view? You'll see it from Division Street, but is that another option to give them more square footage on the other side of the ridge line?
Well, personally, I don't think you should lap over onto the west side on Division Street. It's a very busy street. It's where people walk and
Well,
look around.
You're right, but we're talking about the front of the house.
Frankly, I don't think it's just the front.
We're allowing
So-
vinyl fencing on the sides, not the front. There's thing, and that's where I'm asking what you think.
We're not allowing anything right now, Jed, so.
But I mean, I'm asking, they're going back to Solar City and Tesla for Tesla to come out under their expense to re-engineer and figure out where they can put every possible place. Are we saying, please don't do it on that west side of the ridge in the center of the building?
I think so. I think the more visibility we have on old structures,
Perfect.
the least desirable it is. I mean, if we've got new structures, we can put them there. If they're pretty much hidden from view and they're unobtrusive, it works really well. That's why I brought up the garage, because it was tucked back. You've got a south elevation on that roof. And
Yeah, I just don't want to
if,
come back and say,
yeah,
hey, we
if it could be engineered on the garage, it'd be great, but evidently it can't, so. And I think those are probably the considerations your engineers need to look at is, how can we make this the least obtrusive and visible on the old structure?
Because on the other side, still you have to facing the division street. I'm on the corner.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, it's,
Could we also recommend that they see how far they could push it back on the roof? On that?
Yes.
So if you could, yeah, if you could push it, rather than the 3-foot clearance on the front, to the front gable, if you could push it back, see how much
See how much
you could push it back on that.
okay.
I was just pulling up my notes, if I might. The guidelines that were referenced by staff in the report. I highlighted just that it said after other locations have been investigated and determined infeasible. So I can say that's already been done, although I don't mind attempting to do that again. It is an expense every time we put our engineers to work on this, and so there's considerations there. It recommends a low-profile solar device, only minimally visible. It doesn't say invisible. It says minimally, which is, I think, what we're trying to do here. It recommends something that does not damage historic roofing material or negatively impact the building's historic character and is reversible. All that's true. And then it also says that it recommends parallel to the roof, which we've also accomplished. So all those recommendations appear to be in order.
yeah, I think if we can take a look at that last piece, see if that works, then you guys have done due diligence. We've done our best to try to accommodate it. And if it really can't be done that way, this is the only alternative, then I think we could continue the discussion and get something. But, I mean, we have a couple alternatives right now, pushing that south one further back so we have the absolute minimum at that valley, and then exploring the opportunities around the HVAC unit to see if we can move it there. That would be the ideal for us, if we could do that. If not, pushing it back would work. And I think then we could kind of look at your efforts and these guidelines and feel a little more comfortable with the decision based on that information.
I'd just like to repeat, I really appreciate you're here, and we're all learning about solar in historic districts. I'm sure other historic districts across the country are here and there struggling with it, and we're just trying to find the right way to do it. Certainly the bottom line, on future ones, other ones, try to use the part of the structure that's not as old, or maybe not even old enough to be historic, which starts at 50 years of age, and like for example, I'm only a block away, and if I did solar, which I thought about, I would only put it on the garage that was built about 15 years ago or so, and keep it off the old structure, and that would be way simpler, and it has a south-facing slope, so if I did it, I have some chance of success without getting into a lot of complications. So if there's anything that's not as old, or if there are things that could be reinforced structurally so they could be used, those kind of things need to be at least on the front of the agenda. Like, is any of that possible, so that we can still keep the historic value and do the solar, do right by the solar? You need a minimum amount of wattage and so forth, and to make this make any sense. So.
Okay, so Dr. Yen, are you agreeable to do a little more research and
I'm okay, you know.
Bring it back to us?
But if the Solar City say, the next meeting, they say this is it, that we cannot push forward, then it's your decision to decide, should we move on or should we just deny the case? And then we can have an engineer or more team to explain more, say, maybe this is it, we cannot push anymore, and then we don't get the efficient to put a solar panel on the other side on top of the garage. There's no way that we can do anything, you know. So if that is the case, then
Yeah, I might mention the garage is surrounded by concrete and would require trenching, which we don't support on this kind of installation either, going through the concrete to bring those two systems together. So that's also one of the challenges. I knew this would be a challenging project. I didn't realize how challenging. You know, if we eliminate one structure or one piece of this, it pretty much eliminates the project due to the size situation. So we barely have the ability to harvest sunshine on this building, and I'm happy to help accomplish that for the sake of the homeowner or I guess building owner. I also recognize that building as a place that I had my teeth worked on as a kid as well. So it was very neat to see it go solar. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we'll continue this to the next meeting if you guys can, and actually give us as much documentation as you can. I mean, if you've got engineering reports, even if they're memos, just attach it to the packet, and then the more information we get in this packet next time, the easier it's going to be to go through these criteria and say, okay, they've tried this, they've tried that, we've done our best, and
I guess I would ask for some provisional approval before we end up sending for the third time our engineers and people to work.
we did a provisional approval 15 years ago. And about 3 weeks after it was built, without the final approval, we had to stop work. So, I mean, we want to work with you. We want to see it through, but really leery of provisional approvals because people hear different things when they hear that. So.
Yeah, I understand. Like I said, I'll be glad to attempt to get more panels up there. Taking some off of a workable area, it seems counterproductive in my opinion.
I don't think we're looking at what we're trying to do is put them in a place where we may require more panels and get the same productivity, and at the same time meet the historic guidelines so that it works. So I mean, it's.
Yeah, if the only reason that's not available is because of the 2 pounds per square foot, that's pretty minimal. I mean, concrete roof tile is 1.5 pounds, I believe. So, and that does require some stiffening occasionally. But what I think we're asking for is have someone take a look at it and see it's not physically possible to stiffen that roof. We can't get access into it. We can't get, because of what you said, mechanical systems occupy the entire attic, that we can't get in there. I mean, those are the kind of things we want to have you guys take a look at.
Yeah, and I explained we did so twice. We took a look at all those things and attempted to maximize the system.
I guess what we're saying, I'm not drung on you, but a structural engineer would be helpful.
they want an engineer.
It's the plans are already stamped by our structural engineering team. They don't get to this point without that approval.
And I'm not talking about your system. I'm talking about the extent of the existing condition of the roof.
And when you live in a historic district, if it was cheap and easy, everybody would do it. And living in the district, what I'm afraid of is when the aluminum siding salesman came through and says, never going to have to paint again, and pulling 1,500 pounds of siding off my house 60 years later to find siding underneath there that was perfectly fine. to find asbestos roofing put on over original roofing that you pull off and the original roofing was good, and there was some excellent salesmanship, without a doubt. And, you know, you're talking 2 pounds per square foot. The snow load's got to be far higher than that. A foot of snow's got to weigh more than 2 pounds per square foot.
30 here.
You know, at 30. And so that's kind of, that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of, because the doctor here is doing a lease. It's no money out of pocket. It's renewable. It's all these other kinds of things. But I also look at insulation. Is the house insulated? Do the windows function properly? A lot of stuff, people are sold stuff that you're never going to have to paint again, but then again, your walls still breathe and they're still going through and you still don't have any insulation, and there's no insulation in your attic. So there's a lot of different things that go into a historic district and people that live here. Greg and I both live in the district, and we have found some amazingly terrifying things in our houses, and insulation, lack of insulation, is one of the biggest culprits. So that's why, and I appreciate the fact not to give a provisional kind of possibly maybe when you come back that we might approve it, because that's all that's going to do is hurt us in the long run. And we have to look at the setting of precedents and the longevity of the historic district. And we've only had this purview since 1982. So
Could you go back to the photo of the building? The front. Can't see it there, but you can see it in the packet picture. There's a really nice eave return there at the edge of that gable. That's a character-defining feature of this building. And so even though you read through the whole list of what's recommended and you're watching that, that is something that we don't recommend. That you place anything where it detracts from the character-defining features. And the facade is usually the elevation that has the most character-defining features. So we're working with you here, we are. But just want you to understand why this is hard for us.
So, well, if you'd like a motion, we could make a motion now, and you can go through the process. My sense is that we'll follow the staff recommendation, and you'd have to take it to the Board of Supervisors for appeal and let them do it. It's going to push the project back the same as doing this. Or we can try one more round, see if we can find a better solution, and then maybe avoid that other step.
Which one? I don't know the engineer thing. I think we can go for the second meeting. I have an engineer really double check and respond back, say, can we tuck in those 4 panels somewhere else? Or they say this is it, that they cannot do anything anymore. And then I have an engineer team to respond back that kind of question. So have them to write some project report to you. And then your decision say, okay, should we approve this project or deny this project?
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, that'd be fine. And I mean, you know, even if we can go 4 feet back from that front gable,
Okay.
that may be enough. I'm just, you know,
Yeah.
I'd rather solve this and have a nice project than have to push it down the line and like drag the whole process out. So if you're willing to come back, we'll continue it. You can.
Can I ask another question? Are there ever variances, the 3-foot setback in that, where the 5 are further on the north set that we're okay with, is dealing with the 3-foot setback. Are there ever variances to allow less than 3 feet so we can squeeze in those other 4 that are up front, type of thing? That's the best solution for this house, and therefore a variance is granted, type of thing.
You know, so a variance from our standpoint wouldn't really apply here. It sounds like that 3-foot setback is a fire department requirement, so it would really be up to them whether they're comfortable granting it or not.
That's one of the, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. We can get with the codes to see if there's any, the experts on the codes and fire, see if there's any historic exemptions or, so we can look into that too.
I would say from a installation perspective, having been on roofs before and seen a lot of installs, if we could put more panels on that single area, that makes a easier, simple install than going in two areas. So appreciate your efforts in that regard as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some pretty compact HVAC systems now that are ground mounted that may be a big solution too. I mean, if we can get the HVAC off the roof and you can get a nice heating and cooling system that's even more efficient and give us more space, you may actually end up with more solar productivity than.
Yeah, I know I live in the new style house. I like the AC on the ground, not on the roof too, But I just don't know how the structure inside, how the duct connected, and how complicated to bring the AC unit down. That could be the issue. The whole structure inside had to change too,
It's certainly worth asking, because certainly the new units are way more efficient. I mean, there's a lot of money to be saved there too, so.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so you'll do some more research and resubmit?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll try to figure out if the variance would give you more room on the roof.
Thank you both very much for your time. And Jeff, I'm sure you could contact any one of us to pick historic perspectives, brains on
And
on this
similarly,
issue. And
if you have anybody has individual questions about any other building or whatnot, I'm available to answer any questions after the meeting or individually.
Thank you very much.
thank you very much. Do we have, there it is. Okay, we'll move on to E4 for possible action, HRC-16-068, review of clarifying language on the 2005 design guidelines to identify discouraged materials. Susan.
So I'm just going to briefly introduce this item, and then I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy District Attorney, Dan Yu, to explain the ordinance that he's drafted for you. But it's my understanding that at your meeting in March, you reviewed some draft language regarding the fencing and discouraged materials in the district. And based on that review and direction, our District Attorney's Office has prepared an ordinance for you to review. If you feel that this ordinance is appropriate and vote on it today, then we would schedule it for Planning Commission for a public hearing, and then it would ultimately go to the Board of Supervisors for approval.
Thank you, Susan. Before we start, Dan, has Hope seen this and commented on it?
Yes, she has.
I haven't had any personal discussions with Hope, but it's my understanding she has reviewed it and she didn't have any comments. Right.
Okay, yeah, Dan and I had a brief conversation this afternoon regarding this, and he just kind of went over some of the purpose of some of his edits and stuff. And do you just want to briefly go over those, Dan?
Sure, I'll happy to do that, Mr. Chair. Just try to remember this off the top of my head. I didn't jot down any notes per our conversation earlier today. And the reason I wanted to call the chairman earlier this afternoon was, like he had just explained, I wanted to explain, some of the deviations I had made in this language that I'd come up with. I mean, I think for the most part, it does capture the intent of this body. This is the culmination of a series of discussions we've had on the record, as well as some offline discussions that I know that the chair had some efforts with our planning manager, Hope Sullivan. As Susan had pointed out, at one of the previous meetings, this commission was presented with two alternatives in terms of language. One that was prepared by myself, and then also language that the chairman had provided. What I did was I wound up basically integrating this, so this is sort of a hybrid result of those two different options in terms of language. I did want to point out, for example, that with a specific reference to the Interior standards, Secretary of Interior standards, I just wound up deleting that reference because that's already referenced in a different provision of code, so I thought that was sort of of redundant, did not need to be in there. With respect to the chair's proposed language of having sort of a parallel correspondence from the specific standard to the specific provision, I just decided to keep that lumped in together as one parenthetical as it currently exists in code. I thought that was fine as sort of a blanket measure in reference to all those additional provisions. More substantively, however, though, I know that there was some discussion with respect to maintaining flexibility in this language, and that's sort of been an ongoing or recurring theme. I fully understand the necessity to maintain some flexibility, especially when it comes to historic guidelines. This was an issue that first cropped up when we had that fence appeal regarding the vinyl material several months ago. And, some of the research that I wound up digging up in terms of case law was that, when it comes to historic guidelines and historic districts, various courts throughout the United States have held that, hey, there's no exact rigidity that's necessary for these types of guidelines. It's a little bit different in terms of legal standards that are applied to other ordinances, for example, criminal ordinances or even other civil ordinances where you need a very specific standard. They do want to maintain some flexibility for historic commissions such as ours, because a lot of it is based on, aesthetic and visual and in many respects some subjective interpretations as to what is appropriate within a certain district. So with that in mind, at the same time, I wanted to balance that against, what really was the genesis of this effort. And that was because, some allegations, some claims were that, hey, these guidelines are far too lax, it's too ambiguous perhaps, it's too vague. As a person who owns a piece of property here in the historic district, I don't really know what's allowed and I don't know what's not allowed. So trying to strike a balance there, what I did was I carved out an exemption. Basically, I'm placing the discretionary authority within this commission under certain circumstances. When a person submits an application, he or she has to come before this body and say, these are the reasons why I want to use this material for the construction of a new fence on my property, on this building site, or for purposes of reconstruction, for remediation purposes. So the language does say vinyl, for example, is prohibited. It's not one of these, materials that's traditionally associated with the historic district. It's not masonry. It's not wood. It's not wrought iron. However, even though it's prohibited generally speaking, I am vesting authority in this board to make exceptions. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, under certain extenuating circumstances, an exemption can be carved out, you still have that ability to do so. But I think that strikes the proper balance in terms of maintaining flexibility, yet letting people know they're on notice that this is a quote-unquote prohibited material. There was also some discussions on the record, if I recall, regarding the use of the word authentic with respect to the type of material that's used. I decided not to include that word. I thought it was maybe a little bit too ambiguous. I'm a little fearful of using that word ambiguous because it does have some legal connotations. Generally speaking, though, I wanted to shy away from the term authentic when it comes to the use of certain material, because I don't know if the average person would understand what that means. As an attorney, I would have a hard time interpreting what that means. What's an authentic material? If somebody says, I want to use vinyl and I'm using authentic vinyl, does that actually fit the bill? I don't think it does. So I don't want that to be a legal challenge based on the ambiguity of such a phrase. So in a nutshell, that's what this language does. I do believe it captures the intent of this body, over the series of discussions we've had. Happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Because I wasn't here for it, and I have some thoughts on vinyl fencing, but that's irregardless. Must is it's a big word. I mean, the standards usually say will be, should be. Are we must?
I appreciate the question. I think in instances where I've used must, I think I just replaced the word shall, which was already an existing guideline language. I mean, for me, that was just merely a technical change. It's not really a substantive change. I mean, in my mind, shall and must, they're both the requirements. Will, I would say, is also the same. It's the same sort of rigidity. It's a requirement. It's not a maybe, perhaps, if you
Right.
want to. So in those instances where I've stricken the word shall and replaced it with must, that's just purely a grammatical change that I made for consistency.
So, in regards to, authentic, historically appropriate is always a good choice there. And I think you said traditionally associated, which is also good. I feel like this is really strong, but I wasn't here. I don't have any context leading up to this. On the survey forms, are the fences checked as a related feature? Are they all character-defining features? I mean, are we really coming down on fences? What about vinyl windows? Are we going to have one of these for each?
It's something that needs to be addressed. The genesis of this was the unpermitted vinyl fence, and traditionally, we've worked with property owners to encourage them not to use vinyl fencing. Number of times people have started, they've been told they can't do it, they take it down and replace it, and it's not an issue. Most of our fence approvals are administrative because they're sticking with the traditional materials and things like that. So we're meeting the scale, mass, texture, and everything else. And the vinyl didn't seem to do it. Our options were to be wishy-washy about it and say it may not, or should not, or it shouldn't, or is not acceptable. And I think Dan's use of unless an exception is granted is a really nice way of saying may not, but not, is not. And it leaves it open to the applicant to answer some questions and show us that it meets the criteria that we need.
Can I add to that? That you're right, though. The history of this is because the wishy-washiness harmed us. We became without teeth. And so in order to have teeth, I think the stronger language gives us that ability, at the same time allowing us to have some arbitrariness occasionally when necessary and suitable.
Vinyl wasn't addressed in our original guidelines. I mean, we talk about wood, we talk about masonry. Vinyl wasn't addressed, and it needed to be addressed somewhere.
But not every historic commission has guidelines that say no vinyl fences. Only few do. So that's why I'm asking if we look at the forms for each of these properties. In this case, he was right next to a vinyl fence, right? So we have existing vinyl fences in the historic district. Now, they're not traditional, I know that. There's only a couple fences in this town where I think that this type of language applies to. But, like I said, I don't have the context, and if we all believe we don't like vinyl fences, I don't like vinyl windows.
And I think this whole thing is one piece of the puzzle, but not going to law school, not knowing
Exactly.
the stylistic things, needs to, will,
I'm going to
shall.
say good for you for not going to law school.
Right. And I got sound legal advice the other day. But needs to, shall, leads to me not going to law school. There's some kind of wiggle room in there. There must be some kind of wiggle room. There's some way around this. And I really like the strong language as must. Because owning the district and sinking a ton of money in it and walking down and looking behind Orion Clement's house and seeing a vinyl fence that's sagged and everything else, and you have somebody that put a fence up that didn't have approval, not that they needed a permit, but didn't have approval because they did something just like the neighbor did without approval, without anybody knowing, without it being caught, and without it being maintenanced. Pieces are falling off and things like that. I really, really like how you've crafted this, because as a layman, not with a law degree, must is crystal clear to me that, okay, and there is an exception in here if the commission deems it. So I really like this. Good work.
One more comment. I am that type of preservationist that works within the shoulds. I mean, should gets you a lot of leeway. And so is that what we want? Are we saying, and I understand legally, I appreciate that. And if this is what we need, then I'll vote in favor. But I'm just wondering if are we headed in that direction where we're not going to be, it's not under discussion, where it's like this is the definite.
Well, there's still room for making an exception, though. That's
But
written
does
in the
the
language.
property owner understand that?
Well, they will, because they'll have to make their case.
must.
As
They
far-
must.
And by the way, I'm with you. I think we should go back and talk about vinyl windows, too. I think that's gotten out of hand.
Right now,
for
it's
my-
we're just talking about fences.
That's another issue, but this is the fences,
And
which I used to
windows
talk about a bunch, too. But, so, this is strong, and it should be. And maybe it'll motivate me to get rid of the vinyl fence on the house I bought next door that was approved being removed, but I haven't got around the energy to do it. But it just shouldn't be there, you know. To me, eventually someday vinyl will be historic, but I'll be dead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to answer the question, a little bit of background too at the Board of Supervisors in struggling with this, where there's not strong language that required them to follow the Historic Resources Commission recommendation to deny vinyl fence, so it got approved. They also gave direction to go back to the board and take a position on it, basically, to write it into code. So I think that's why it's come back to this point, that after discussion, the HRC has taken a position on it, and we've tried to incorporate that into the code. So it is at the direction of our Board of Supervisors, too, to provide that clarity.
Yeah, and I think the exemption is a great alternative to the shoulds, because it does lay out for new fences what you need to present to us to make your case that you can be granted an exception. So it doesn't shut the door, it doesn't slam the door, but
It's hard to open.
yeah.
Didn't that kind of put it in a similar category to a variance? I mean, really, that's kind of what it is, really. It's the same arbitrariness you'd find in applying for a variance, where you know the rules, but there's still wiggle room in a variance for, in this one instance, this circumstance, it's rational.
Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, I didn't ask for public comment on the last item, but is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none, and seeing that there was no public, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors adoption of an ordinance relating to zoning, amending Title 18 Appendix of the Carson City Municipal Code to revise certain guidelines for the design of fences located within the historic district of Carson City and providing other matters properly relating thereto.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second.
Motion and a second, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Dan, and Hope, and Susan. Next item is F, staff reports. What,
There was a late.
that was, yeah, is are the late submissions part of the record?
Yes, they are. So, from what I gather from Hope, there was a request from this commission to kind of provide a recap of administrative approvals during the meetings. And so, as a result of that, we have given, as a part of late material, the list of all the administrative approvals that have occurred this year to date. And that's a part of your late material packet. I kind of just went through really quickly to try and summarize what those approvals were. Looks like we have had so far 5 re-roofs, 1 for signage, 2 doors, 4 for concrete, stone, or other concrete-type flat work, 5 fences or railing, 1 painted mural, 1 rain gutter addition, and then some skylights on the back side of a garage. So we'll continue to provide this report to the commission every time we meet in summary, and then also just as a running tally if that is the pleasure of the commission.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions of Susan on the staff report? I don't see commission member comments on here, so future agenda items, I assume that Dr. Yen will get with us at some point.
Yes, Dr. Yin, I'm sure will be back, and then I expect that after some redesign, the item originally scheduled under E3, which was a signage request for Prestige Care, that's the new memory care facility over on basically the corner of Mountain and Washington. It kind of spans both of those streets. There is a portion on the Washington Street side that's in the district, as you know, and they had proposed a sign that staff made some suggestions on, and so they decided to pull their application for now to do some redesign and bring it back at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Public comments, any?
Future agenda item? Could we just reiterate, I think we should give some consideration to plastic windows and how we can become more focused on that issue.
I agree.
Any other agenda items the commissioners would like to see? Maybe in our January meeting, we can think about items that we'd like to bring up during the course of the year, and maybe have some ongoing discussion about things like that too.
Sure.
Kind of set a little bit of an agenda for what we want to accomplish that our next year. Okay, any other commission member comments or suggestions?
Mike, what do we do for public education about what they can and cannot do?
The community development department is pretty, it's pretty much, you go in there and they'll throw almost anything they have at you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do, and we've had some discussion with members of the commission about this, but when property transfers hands in the district, we get a report every month from the assessor's office, and so we send a letter out along with this design guideline book that basically has all of our design guidelines in it. Obviously, we're making a change right now, so we'll need to look at updating this book at some point in the future. But this has the Secretary of Interior standards in it, as well as a lot of standard terms and definitions in architecture, and then all the specific guidelines that are required. And then in the cover letter that we send, we explain to them about the application and approval process, and that it is required for them to gain approval for exterior improvements.
Is that it?
Can I add? Sorry. I'm just going to add from the education piece as opposed to the regulatory piece. So recently, and this was, I think, before you were officially on the commission, but we have been making efforts to provide some educational opportunities to not only our commissions, but also to the district. So we recently had a commission assistance mentoring program through the Historic Preservation Fund grant, and that included all of this commission, the Story County Comstock Historic District Commission, and the City of Reno Commission. So we had them all come down for 2 days over a weekend to get educated, but we actually also sent that out to every property owner in the district to invite them to come as well. So we did get a handful, and we are trying to get the word out to help people understand the importance of maintaining their historic integrity of their buildings.
Thanks, Susan. G, public comments. Members of the public who wish to address the commission may approach the podium at this time to speak on matters relevant to or within the authority of the Historic Resources Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken or matter raised under this public comment portion of the agenda. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move to H. Entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Got tired of me being the